critically few oil and gas resources themselves. The European Union is therefore critically addicted to the imports of Russian oil and gas flowing in from their pipelines, and it severely limits their abilities to actually confront Moscow's aggression. In order to overcome this dependency and energy insecurity, the European Commission has, since the invasion, outlined a 10-point proposal to make the EU completely independent from Russian fossil fuels by the end of the decade. But of course, that is going to take years to accomplish, and until it happens, every drop of oil and gas that Europe continues to buy from Russia will go directly towards funding the Russian war machine in Ukraine. The problem, though, is that there aren't really any easy alternatives for Europe to choose. Norway, the second largest provider of gas to the European Union, is already at maximum export capacity through their own pipelines and cannot provide any more than they already are. In theory, the EU could replace some of Russia's gas with liquefied natural gas or LNG imports coming in on tanker ships from friendly countries like the United States, Qatar, or Australia. But there are many problems with this strategy as well. First, Europe lacks a lot of the infrastructure that's required for importing LNG. In order to do so, they need LNG processing terminals at ports that can take in the LNG from container ships, turn the liquid back into its gaseous state, and pump that into pipelines. Unfortunately, Europe has very few of these LNG terminals existing right now, with only a handful in Portugal, Spain, Italy, France, the UK, Belgium, the Netherlands, Poland, and Greece, while major global economies like Germany, who import more than half of their gas from Russia, have zero. So in order to begin importing LNG at a large scale, the Germans will have to build brand new LNG terminals. But that is going to cost billions of dollars and take years to accomplish. Secondly, even if the EU had the infrastructure, the supply chain of LNG is already highly constrained as it is, and met by massive demand for it in Asian economies like China, South Korea, and Japan. If the EU suddenly began buying LNG at a large scale, then the price for everyone would increase dramatically. The EU could also rely a bit heavier on their own limited domestic sources of gas, but this too is highly problematic. The largest natural gas field within Europe, and one of the top 10 largest in the entire world, is right here, the Groningen field in the Netherlands. For decades, this field provided gas that powered much of the Netherlands and the rest of the continent, and in 2013, provided as much gas was extracted from it that flows through Nord Stream 1 towards Germany today. But the field's days are numbered. The extraction of gas from here caused wide-scale subsidence. That is, the sinking of ground beneath it. This phenomenon was further accompanied by significant earthquakes in the region of the northern Netherlands that damaged many houses and caused significant local unrest. Therefore, it was decided by the Dutch government nearly a decade ago to steadily phase the gas field out between 2014 and 2022, when production was supposed to halt entirely. But now, faced with the threat of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the dire need to get the continent off of Russia's gas supply, the Netherlands has decided to continue extraction in the field until as late as 2028, with unknown seismic consequences around Groningen and the northern Netherlands for the future. And there are precious few other alternatives for the European Union to make. In theory, new gas pipelines could be constructed into the continent from other sources like the gas fields around Israel and Cyprus in a proposed project called EastMed, or from the gas fields of Nigeria that would loop around the African continent towards Spain. But just like building out the LNG infrastructure, these projects will cost billions of dollars and take years to develop, and in the end, they'll each only substitute a fraction of the gas that Russia is capable of pumping into the continent. Meanwhile, and quite unlike Europe, the United States is tremendously geologically well endowed, with enormous quantities of domestic oil and gas resources across some of the world's largest fields in Texas, Alaska, North Dakota, and northern Pennsylvania. Thus, a full 65% of America's oil and gas supply is produced domestically within the country, and America has tremendously more energy security than Europe does as a result, and thus substantially more flexibility when it comes to dealing with Russia. Therefore, it was a much easier decision when President Joe Biden decided to ban the imports of Russian oil and gas into America, since Russian fuels were only providing less than 2% of the total U.S. supply supply in the first place. America can easily replace the difference by banning Russian imports, whereas Europe simply cannot. Of course, the Russians do realize that by this point, their lucrative days of selling fossil fuels to the West are rapidly coming to an end, and in anticipation, have been massively pivoting their supplies and business towards Asia, where many major economies like China, India, and Pakistan have still so far declined to join in on any serious sanctions against Russia. Right now, Europe remains Russia's largest customer of gas by far, since they import around 200 billion cubic meters from them per year. By comparison, right now, China only purchases around 38 billion cubic meters a year from Russia, which is primarily provided by the Power of Siberia pipeline here in the Russian Far East. However, in light of recent events, this will likely change very quickly. China has yet to become connected to the massive gas fields of northern Siberia that the Russians use to dump gas into Europe from. And under an agreement that is closer than ever now to fruition, a second pipeline called Power of Siberia 2 may be finally constructed from these very same fields directly to China's hungry industrial core around Beijing. That'll double Russia's gas exports to China. Unlike the West, China will likely continue without passing any serious financial sanctions on the Russians, and quite to the contrary, will even provide the Russian government with investments into new pipeline infrastructure that flows towards Beijing, like Power of Siberia 2. Because they want and need Russia's vast energy resources. And now that business in Europe is drying up, China senses an opportunity to make a good deal, while Russia sees the opportunity to simply shift business elsewhere. As a result, while the war in Ukraine is ripping apart all of the bonds between Europe and Russia, it also seems to be pushing Russia and China closer together from a financial and energy perspective. Over time, Russia may end up pivoting the entirety of its energy resources towards the emerging markets and economies of Asia. And from China's perspective, whatever happens in Ukraine might provide invaluable insights into how a potential future Chinese invasion of Taiwan might go. At the same time as all of this has been happening, another fascinating way that the world is changing before our eyes over this war can be seen in the air.